All right, welcome into our very first episode of the Power 2. TJ Pittinger here, Cole Thompson, and Tom Hannifan going to chat all things college football with you today. We're going to try and do this every Wednesday at noon. So if you've watched some of our other content here on College Football Addiction, if you've caught Cole on the SEC Unfiltered channel, if you've caught Tom on Believe in Big Ten or State of State, make sure that you are subscribed so you don't miss this. We'll be live with you every Wednesday at noon. Lord willing, if we have to shift that around a little bit, we will. But that's the plan. Guys, thanks for joining me, man. I'm excited for this.
Okay, I guess I'll go first. Yeah, I'm really excited. You know what? This is a good time. See, we're already trying to learn how to go work with each other. It's a learning process.
SEC bias, I see.
We run the ship. We've been running the national ship. Well, I guess you guys have for a little bit, but no, it's a good time. It's a good effort. I'm excited to be on this project with you guys. It's definitely something that's really been in the works. And both Tom and I, we love college football. TJ loves college football. We're going to call it as is. We're not going to BS or sugarcoat it, even though we do know that the Power 2 are really the Power 2 for a big time reason.
Yeah, I'm excited about this, and especially given the news recently of how much the Big Ten and the SEC will be controlling the college football playoff. It just makes perfect sense to put more focus on the two conferences that really are dominating this sport, could take more control of this sport, and frankly, this is the epicenter of FBS football right now, so why not focus on it?
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think what we will do, and we all do love college football, and I think we know where this sport is heading. I think we know the direction that it's heading. I like the name, I like the title. Like we've workshopped a couple of different things, and we understand where this thing is going. But I do think that we will try to not neglect the other. I mean, I still have the Florida State football sitting behind me, right? Like I'm still wearing Garnet right now. We'll try to not neglect the other conferences and what happens. But again, this sport is moving in one direction, and if that direction changes in 3 years and we're still doing it, then maybe we'll change the title, right? And we'll figure something else out. But I think we kind of all realize what's happening here, and I'm excited for this. Tom hit me up maybe a month or so ago and just kind of had an idea of like doing something extra. You've come on the show several times, and we've chatted a lot of Penn State and Big Ten. And at first, I wasn't sure how we would put this together, and shout out to Chris over at SEC Unfiltered, kind of referred Cole over as well, and man, what did we chat maybe 2 weeks ago, guys, and put this together, and here we are. So I am jacked for this because I just love college football, and my wife doesn't love the idea of me doing another live show, but it is what it is, and I'm excited to do
it. The Bills, and like we're dying. There's no football now. Last weekend sucked without football. I'm a junkie. Let's do this. Yeah.
Who isn't a junkie at this point? Seriously, who does not love everything about college football and wants to talk about 24/7? Because if you are, then you should subscribe to the channel, because that's what we're going to do from here on out.
Yeah, no, it should be fun. I appreciate you guys for joining. So let's jump into it. Obviously, we got huge news. I mean, sport altering news, which it feels like we get that, not to overhype it, because it feels like we've gotten that once a month over the last 2.5 years. But massive, massive news with the college football playoff changing. And we kind of all knew that would happen. Ross Dellinger came out with an article. Obviously, he's hearing from folks at the SEC and the Big Ten. The meetings are happening literally as we speak. But big time expansion is coming. Cole, why don't you start us off with this? Let's talk a little bit about what's going on and kind of chat through some of it.
So we already know there's going to be conversations of us moving from a 12-team playoff to a 14-team playoff, and eventually potentially a 16-team playoff. The Big Ten and the SEC basically have said, hey, we want to control the narrative of how this sport goes, because we're the ones that bring in the most revenue. We're the ones that bring in the most dollars. We're the ones that control most of what people want to watch in terms of viewership. So we want a guaranteed number of teams to be able to be in the college football playoff, regardless of what the records say at the end of the year. And we already heard people complain about for a long time, the SEC plays only 8 conference games. Well, the reason they play 8 conference games is because if you see 8 or 9 teams every single year ranked inside the top 25, and so they feel like their schedule is more challenging. Why throw in an extra game against another top 25 team where, yeah, you're going to get 8 wins, but you're also going to get 8 losses included with that. So why would you go ahead and risk losing more of a spot for a chance to have more representation in the college football playoff? So here's what's going to happen. They're going to go to 14 teams. There's going to be 4 qualifiers in the SEC and in the Big Ten. Regardless of how the season pans out, we're going to have 8 teams represented in each of those conferences. Now we're going to see a 9th scheduled team added onto the SEC. So they'll play 9 scheduled games. There'll be 3 out of conference games. There's conversations going on that there will be now a Big Ten SEC battle where you are going to see the Big Ten and the SEC every once in a while play against each other. So Alabama versus Ohio State, going to be more common. Georgia versus Michigan, going to be more common. Ole Miss versus Illinois, going to be more common. We're going to get 8 teams represented. And then what we're going to see is potentially a shift in the narrative of how do we go about conference championship weekend. So in the SEC specifically, they're probably going to give the first 2 teams a bye. They automatically have qualified for the college football playoff. Then what we're going to see is 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5. They're going to play in a round robin tournament instead of the SEC championship, and that will be for the other 2 automatic qualifiers. After that, everything else is going to be based off of the College Football Playoff Committee, which is really going to have a minor say now moving forward in the selection process because of the other teams that are represented. You could see 5 SEC teams in. You could see 5 Big Ten teams in. You could see 6 Big Ten teams in. But basically, this is what's going to happen for the rest of the college football playoff world to survive. You got to keep in mind that the Big Ten and the SEC could easily say, hey, we're not happy with how this postseason picture is going to go. So we're just going to take the ball. We're going to create our own narrative. We're going to build our own media market, and we're going to have our own college football playoff, thus creating the Super League. So basically at this point, what you're saying is this is the best course of action for the ACC and the Big Ten to still be a part of the college football playoff, to include a group of 5 representative. We want to be able to keep this together. You're going to have to play it our way. And if you don't play it our way, then we're going to go ahead and take the ball and we're going to do our own thing.
And Cole, that's nearly what happened, and that's why this control is in place at all for the Big Ten and the SEC, because that's essentially the narrative. The Big Ten and the SEC, we're going to walk and make our own playoff. It was part of me that I'm like, kind of jaded, and I was like, yeah, we should have just done that anyway. But no, I do want to see representation, parity, and opportunity for all these other teams that are not within the Power 2. I think it hopefully will solve a few things. One, I'm tired of the cupcake games. I think a lot of people are. It's a wasted game, and I'm looking at you in the SEC.
Oh, God, here we go. Let's throw Lindenwood in there for Illinois every other year. Come on.
Right, I understand that, and that's a fair point. But like the Big Ten will consistently do those games in September, maybe into October. But to see those late in the year when you want to see meaningful football, hell, we want to see meaningful football the entirety of the season. So if this cuts down on the instances where, Penn State is playing Nevada this upcoming year, does that game need to happen? No, but maybe throw in an ACC team there, a Big 12 team there, a Pac-12 team, whatever is left of the Pac-12, that is. Try and throw in some different games that you're going to get fun matchups for all these fans out there. For me, the ranking system feels almost completely obsolete. We're still going to continue to do them, and it's not saying that they aren't important. Like, it is part of driving viewership that you tune into a game because you see, 1 versus 6, this is a big game, all that sort of stuff. But the concept of number 1 in the country and the ill-fated Kirk Herbstreit comment of best versus deserving, I want to see that go away. I'm done with the eye test. I'm done with, well, they feel like they're better than this team. I don't care. Get more towards an NFL model where here's what you have to do to qualify for those 4 spots that you mentioned. I love the concept of the play-in. The downside of this that no one cares about is kids are playing more games. Kids are being put in situations where they're getting banged up and they're trying to put stuff on tape. They're trying to make money, all that sort of stuff. The conferences do not care about that at all. It's about more games. Fans are not going to complain, but I do at least have to speak up for players and coaches who are working a ridiculous schedule as it is. And it's like, hey, you're going to play-in games, and there'll be 2 of those play-in games, and we're going to get rid of this. We're going to move this here. It's very pro football style in that you're trying to get more bang for your buck. I get it, but I think this is a good step. I don't love seeing this expand to 16. I think it's just going to get bloated at some point where you have teams that are on the bubble, so to speak, that you're like, I know this team isn't even going to compete credibly. And we've talked about the blowouts in the past. So I think it's a good step. It's a step in the right direction, but there's still a lot of stuff that has to be worked out, not to mention the seeding of the playoff. That was a disaster this past year.
Tom, it's not going to change, though. That's the biggest problem, is because of what's going to happen is now we're going to see people argue, well, what happens when the Big Ten and the SEC play against each other? Here's going to be a narrative that you and I both can agree upon. We're going to hear people say, well, look at the Big Ten's record against the SEC, Because if they do have that home and home matchup where Michigan takes on South Carolina and Alabama travels to play against Penn State, whoever has that win, and if it's, say, I don't know, 10-6 in favor of the SEC is going to say, well, we need more teams in than the Big Ten this year because of we beat you head to head. But then you're going to hear the Big Ten say, well, look at who we have here at number 5. It's Illinois. They played 6th ranked teams and they went 5-1 during that stretch. Shouldn't they get a qualifier automatically because of that the fifth SEC team played an unranked Colorado or an unranked Nevada squad or a G5 program that's still involved? Like, that's what's going to change about the sport. So yeah, when you talk about what is the norm about the future of college football, we still are going to have these arguments. And the problem is because of we're expanding the playoffs. We're going from 12 to 14. 14's never going to be a qualifier. Eventually, we're going to get to 16. And then people are going to complain that we should have 24. Thus, taking away the progress of what is the regular season, the value of the regular season, adding on more games for college football players, thus weakening the transfer portal because if you're going to have that window that is either going to close earlier or open later, right, and it's going to become more of a problem. But here's what I will say to those who are arguing against this. Whether or not you want to admit, the Big Ten and the SEC have run the college football playoff. I did this process this morning and looked through the past 11 years, and let's just say we went to a 12-team model. When it was the Power 5, 54% of the college football playoff teams came from either the SEC or the Big Ten. And then when you throw Notre Dame in, 59% of those teams came in. So let's just say that we went to the Power 4 model. So Stanford and all those teams from the West Coast are now in the ACC. Texas and Oklahoma join the SEC. You guys get Oregon and Washington. 69% come from the SEC, the Big Ten, and Notre Dame. So that's leaving 31% left in favor of the Group of 5 and the 2 other conferences. You're arguing with a brick wall at this point, saying that the SEC and the Big Ten, with the most value, with the most representation, and with the most revenue, are not the teams that are going to be rewarded. Because if even in years that you sat out and said, well, the ACC deserves more teams, one year the ACC or the Big 12 had more teams in the college football playoff than a Big 10 or an SEC squad.
So here's it's not a perfect fix. And I don't know that there is a perfect fix, but I'm going to shoot some holes in some problems I have with it. If we get this, it is closer to an NFL model. But what you do out of division, in the NFL, right? So out of conference in college matters. And I worry that though we're all starved for football and though we're all going to tune in, that the Alabama-Ohio State game that we would all love to see, right? We would all love if that was taking place. I worry that the relevance for that game is essentially zero. Now, is there a chance that they could be an at-large team? I mean, possibly, but most years, there's really going to be one at-large team. If it goes 4-4, 2-2, there's 12, right? And you got 2 more teams. Well, if Notre Dame's in the top 14, they're in, and you got a Group of 5 team. That year specifically, there are no at-large teams. Now, if Notre Dame doesn't make it, then there's one at-large team. So I worry that those big out-of-conference matchups early in the year are irrelevant. Or what happens in a year like this year that we just had, where Florida plays Miami and Florida State in the same year, and say they go 1-2 out of conference, but then they go 7-2 in conference and they get in on a tiebreaker, right? They're an 8-4 team, maybe that lost to a 10-2 Miami that's on the outside looking in. That's where I feel like it creates kind of what you do out of conference becomes, I don't want to say completely irrelevant, but pretty irrelevant. Like those are preseason games, and then what you do in conference is all that matters in this model. Again, it's maybe better than what we have now, but it's not a full-on NFL model, which the NFL has parity, and I understand all the reasons for it. But whereas when the Bucks play the Bills, that game matters maybe just slightly less than when the Bucks play the Falcons, right? It's very close because your overall record still matters. So I worry about that year where, a team with a new coach goes 0-3 out of conference and then gets things rolling and maybe has an easier conference schedule and goes 8-0 in conference, or 9-0, I guess, in this conference. And you just say, man, none of their out-of-conference games matter at all. So that to me, do we get to a point early in the year where coaches treat that like preseason because they are playing more games down the stretch? And every coach is going to want to win games. There's no doubt. But is there a point in that year where they say, man, we ain't going balls to the wall on this. This is a preseason matchup. The result of this game, we want to win it, but it just doesn't mean this much, right? And so that is a worry to me. I don't think it would be year one. I don't think it would be year two. But if you start to get to a point where teams are losing out of conference games and it doesn't hurt them at all, do we view those out of conference games as, and these are exciting matchups today because those games would mean so much, right? You get a Bama Ohio State week 1 and you're like, this is amazing. This is a playoff preview. Where in 4 years do we say that game, great, you won it and it looks great, but does it really matter that much?
Well, what would you rather have, that or something like Indiana that goes 11-1 and doesn't play anybody worth notice out of conference schedule? Because that's the other thing that we can say. People want to go poke holes in Indiana's resume this past year, and then when they played against Notre Dame, yes, the score says that it was at least somewhat relevant in the fourth quarter, but the game was over going into the third. I mean, we already knew what was going to be the outcome. But you can poke the same holes in the SEC. You can poke the same holes in the Big Ten with other programs. I mean, you look at a team like Illinois this past year that went 10-3. 3 of their losses, one was a very close loss. I think it was to Minnesota, but the other 2 were blowouts. And then their out-of-conference schedule was against a Kansas squad that did have a healthy Jalen Daniels. So, I mean, there's certain value that comes into that. I look at a game like the Notre Dame versus Texas A&M matchup that did have significant value to Texas A&M's resume, because if they would have won that game, they would have finished 9-3, and they still would have been in the running for a college football playoff spot. But instead, they went 8-4, and they finished off the year. They would have been 7-0 to begin the season before they fell off the face of the earth. So it matters, but how much will it matter when it comes to, we look at our conference schedule? Does that matchup between the Big Ten and the SEC, does that carry more value when we get to a 9th conference game and then that 10th game being the head-to-head matchups?
I think it's absolutely going to carry more value. And I think the thing that is definitely going to be a byproduct of this has nothing to do with the Big Ten and the SEC. It has everything to do with Notre Dame. And what was talked about during the playoff this year is that, well, Notre Dame, by being independent, is raking in a lot more money than all these other teams that are playing in conferences because you have to divvy it up. I see a I
think we lost Tom.
Tom, you may be on mute or disconnected there. First show glitches.
Of course I was. Let's see. We got Tom. Well, Tom's coming. TJ, let me get your opinion on this, because we know eventually there are going to be teams that when we go to this Power 2 level and eventually it becomes a Super League, do we start seeing more teams try to get to the SEC or the Big Ten, or do they go independent like Notre Dame? Because you look at Notre Dame right now, the revenue that they're bringing in, they get to keep all the repercussions. They don't have to share it with the rest of the conference like anybody else does.
Yeah, I see Immaculate in the chat here, and I'd like Immaculate to put together a spreadsheet for me, or like how much did Notre Dame make by keeping it all versus how much did one Big Ten team make by 4 teams going and getting to share that revenue from 4 teams, and then all the other bowl money too, right? Like so the Big Ten, how many bowl teams did the Big Ten have? Roughly
Big 10 had 11 or 12 bowl teams. And then
so how much money did one singular, like how much money did Ohio State make for having 12 teams? Well, Ohio State might be a bad example because they won it. Maybe they.
What about Illinois? Illinois would be good.
Yeah. How much did one team make for getting 12 parts of the pie as opposed to Notre Dame's 1? And that's a true just question out there, right? Like I don't know the answer to that, but I'd assume it cuts into that Notre Dame gap pretty significantly. To answer the question, how many teams that are not in the Power 2 right now could pull off what Notre Dame does? Like how many teams really have the brand value to
3.
be truly independent, right? Like maybe Florida State and North Carolina. Like maybe
I would say Florida State, Miami, North Carolina.
Yeah.
And if you want to throw Clemson in just because of Clemson's value over the last 2 decades, maybe has some potential, but Florida State, North Carolina, and Miami are the only 3 in the ACC.
And I'm not even, and even as a Florida State guy, like I think it would work for them, but I'm not like sold. It's more of a question mark, right? Like, could they really get a Notre Dame type of deal? Or are they getting a deal that's still in between the ACC and SEC, or in between the ACC and Big Ten? Which, if that's the case, you'd rather just get to one of the Power 2 because then you'd be making more, right? I don't know that Florida State could demand more than one Big Ten share or more than one SEC share. And so a Notre Dame can. I don't know that a Florida State could. And so independent, maybe better than ACC, still not as good as where I think they want to get. And that would be the same for, but to answer the first part of the question, Yeah, I mean, I think that's why I think that the people at Florida State and Clemson and UNC, it's come out, Miami being a private university, like I think they're working on this stuff too. Yes, that is their goal to get out ASAP because they understand where this is going.
Well, we know that the buyout can happen in 2031. And I feel like that maybe for this year, when trying to figure out what the future looks like for the college football playoff, maybe you sit by idly and just play nice with the ACC. But once you know what the pathway is to get to the postseason, how many years you see 6 SEC teams go, 7 Big Ten teams go, whatever the number is, you're going to watch as they try to break their breach of contract and they join a different conference because they want that guaranteed representation. And as long as the ACC and the Big 12 are not getting the same amount of numbers as the SEC and the Big 10, we're already working towards the Super League. Whether we want to admit it or not, whether we like it or not, that eventually is going to become the new norm of college football.
I think the pressure is now on for the teams that are the have-nots within the Big Ten and the SEC, and it's why we have Mississippi State on this list for today's show, is that there's a lot of teams out there that have just been happy to roll the football out there, and gosh darn it, we went 6-6 and we tried real hard. That is all of a sudden going to be under a microscope. The scrutiny is going to be even higher. If you consistently are a bottom feeder, why wouldn't these conferences take another look and be like, why are we giving you X percentage? Why wouldn't we drop that? Why wouldn't we bump you and get somebody in here that's going to boost our value altogether? There's a lot of questions that are going to come up because of this.
And you're also, I think, going to see teams that are sitting on the outside that haven't been able to bring in that same amount of revenue be told, hey, we appreciate what you've done for the SEC and the Big Ten over the last decade. We're adding in Georgia Tech. We're adding in Clemson. Right. We're adding in Miami because of they bring in more money than you. And we want to have better representation. So enjoy winning your G5 level conference championship, but you're no longer welcome into the party. We got to kick you out. You've had too many to drink. Time to go home, buddy.
I kind of wonder on this 4-4. I almost call it like a compromise for the Big Ten and the SEC. It's interesting to me because there would be years, and Cole, I know you did this. I did this too, specifically for the Big Ten, but in doing it for the Big Ten, I noticed it for the SEC a lot too. There were years that the Big Ten in a 14-team playoff would have had 6 teams. Yep. There were years in the SEC would have had 7. But it feels like a compromise of 4 to avoid the year where you only get 2 or avoid this year where you only got 3, right? And so, listen, yeah, the SEC or the Big Ten in any given year could have had 6 or 7 when, the SEC maybe has a down year like this year or a lot of parity in a year. But it feels like a compromise where they're somewhat lowering their ceiling, but they're making sure that their floor is always the same, which at the end of the day, none of this is about the fan. None of this is about like the best matchup. Like it's all about money. And so you can plan now, you are always going to have 4 teams in. So you always know at the end of the year, and if you get lucky with that last one, because Notre Dame doesn't make it, whatever, maybe you get an extra one in. But you always know that you are set. And from a planning perspective, the SEC knows in 2026, we are going to make X dollars. Now, if they get that 5th team in, that's a bonus, right? But the SEC and the Big Ten know we are going to make X number of dollars because we have this many teams getting in. We're not going to have a year where we have less. And so what that lets them do, I think, is project out, okay, well, we know we're going to make X, Y, Z in 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, whatever. We can project out what we're going to make, and it lets them budget for that. It lets them spend the money. That lets them pull in other teams, give more shares, half shares, whatever, when they do realign things. And so I think both conferences are somewhat limiting their ceiling. But again, they want to avoid that year where the conference goes to crap and they only get 2 teams in, right? So I thought that was an interesting thing because there would certainly be years where the SEC would get more than 4 teams in, and same for the Big Ten.
And here's the best part. Now everyone can stop complaining about the SEC playing that nonchalant game in November. You're getting a 9th game in
I'm still going to complain about it. It's horrible.
People will complain that you face off against Louisiana, but then you can throw in the Big Ten and they face off against Nevada. So it's the same thing. Just do it in September instead of in November.
Exactly.
We will obviously continue to cover this. We will continue to talk about it as the changes happen. Listen, if you're watching this live, again, College Football Addiction is where you can find The Power 2, a brand new show. This is episode 1. We will be back next Wednesday at noon as well. Make sure that you are subscribed so you don't miss any of this. And I'm sure that we may even have to do an emergency episode depending on what comes out of this SEC Big Ten stuff that's happening. But let's move on a little bit and talk about. We're gonna do this on kind of a weekly basis. We're gonna go through every team in the SEC, every team in the Big Ten, some of the teams outside of that, those two conferences as well. But we are starting from the bottom and working our way up. So hopefully we don't lose you, because we do have some exciting stuff later in the episode as well. But let's start today with Mississippi State, a team that we just kind of mentioned, right? Bottom of the pack when it comes to the SEC. What ends up happening there? What do we end up doing with them? What do they look like in 2025? Can they get any better? Cole, you're the SEC guy, so we'll let you start it off.
So last year they finished 2-10, and underneath first-year head coach Jeff Lebby, they lost every single game in conference play. They also lost to Toledo at home, which is an inexcusable loss for anybody in the SEC, let alone the bottom dwellers of the conference. The big problem was that they lost starting quarterback Blake Shapen 5 games into the year. They had to turn to Michael Van Buren, who a lot of people thought needed a full season to kind of build his relationship in this offense. The average margin of defeat in conference play was 17.7 points. The defense was dreadful. They never stood a chance in multiple games. The Tennessee game was a blowout. The Arkansas game was a blowout. Even though it felt like that there was a close call in the Egg Bowl, eventually you watch this Jackson Dart kind of put together his process, and they end up winning that game. They've added in some key players this offseason. I've liked what I've seen for the transfer portal edition. 24 new names coming on in for the 26 departed, including former Florida State quarterback Luke Kromenhoek, South Alabama running back Fluff Bothwell, Georgia wide receiver Anthony Evans, Brennan Thompson from Oklahoma, Colby Keenum from Kentucky, and Jalen Smith coming in from Tennessee. Now, the big problem is some of their key departures are signature key departures. You can't find a Kevin Coleman on the street most days who had over 900 receiving yards in an offense that was very hit and miss at times. You lose Mario Craver, the star wide receiver, the vertical threat. He's now at Texas A&M. Michael Van Buren is following the Dante Moore approach, sitting behind Garrett Nussmeier for a season, learning underneath Joe Sloan's offense to take over for LSU in 2026. So I think that they've lost a lot of pieces, but they've done a good job of kind of back-ending when it comes to building in the recruiting trail. 4-star linebacker Tyler Lockhart comes in. Tyshawn Willis, the edge player out of the state of Mississippi, comes on in. 4-star wide receiver Kamario Taylor comes on in. All top 100 players by 247 Sports. I think when you look at the expectations for Mississippi State this year, this is a team that just needs to double its win total. They still are in the rebuilding process. And in my philosophy, when I look at a brand new program, I give you 3 years at a Power 4 level. Year 1, build your foundation. Year 2, establish your culture. Year 3, strike while you're hot. They've done the bare minimum of setting a standard. What is supposed to be the expectations on offense next year? For an offense to work underneath Jeff Lebby, you have to have stability in the run game that opens up the vertical passing attack. They call it the veer and shoot offense. So vertical passing in the process of what you saw underneath Art Briles back in the day with Baylor. Then you have an emphasis on the ground game. I love the addition of what they bring in with Fluff Bothwell. I thought that he was a star running back for South Alabama last year, led the conference in the Sun Belt with 13 rushing touchdowns, 7.5 yards per carry, which was number 2 in the conference, over 900 rushing yards. You're going to have a quarterback battle going on, and probably, in my opinion, a better quarterback battle with Luke Kromenhoek coming on in from FSU to battle with Blake Shapen. I think the offensive line is going to have to be the big difference maker in this game. You got to be able to, I think, have stability when it comes to protecting whoever your quarterback is and to be able to open up your run game. Key matchups that I'm looking for next season, September 6th at home against Arizona State. That was a back and forth battle out in Tempe last year. What is it going to be like down in Starkville? September 27th versus Tennessee. That is the rematch of one of the closer games that we saw last year. It's their first SEC game. October 18th on the road. First game after a bye against Florida. November 1st against Arkansas. To me, that is the one conference game that I think I am most confident that Mississippi State can win. And then, of course, the Egg Bowl on November 29th against Ole Miss at home out in Wade Davis Stadium.
What do you think? So I watched, obviously, a lot of Luke this year at Florida State. I mean, do you have an early thought on whether or not, I mean, it's pre-spring, right? So yeah. I'm asking you to take a pretty big shot here. Do you think that he can beat Al Shapen with the experience that he has?
I think that what you're doing is you're giving Blake Shapen a leash. You're saying, here's what we think that you can do. We got to see what we got in Kromenhoek because we're bringing him on in. We believe that he could be an upgrade over you for the long term. So throughout the spring practice, I believe you will see both Kromenhoek and Shapen get reps with the first team offense. Who looks more comfortable being able to deliver the strikes downfield? Who has more accuracy? Who is better underneath the pocket? You also got to look at what the offensive line is built like. Because if Kromenhoek is a pocket passing guy and he's not able to deliver the strikes because of the pass rush is stepping on up and they're getting in the backfield faster, If Shapen gives you a better shot of being able to maneuver outside, utilize his legs, we saw the mobility at Baylor at times during his tenure in Waco. If that adds more value, you got to throw in the best course of action. That doesn't mean that Croman Hoke isn't a guy that you don't believe in, but you got to look at your offensive line and say what works and what doesn't. If we have stability that where we can win with a 3-step drawback and a quarterback can deliver clean strikes down the field, I'm going to say you go with Croman Hoke because I don't know what the potential is, but I feel like it's a lot higher than Shapen. If Shapen right now feels like the best fit, he's going to start week 1, and until you start to figure out, hey, he's not the guy, let's turn to the other guy, it to me feels like that's where we're going to kind of turn our head to.
Yeah, looking at Mississippi State in this situation is kind of what I was talking about before, is just they're in a position where you're in the best possible place, but you've got to start performing at an SEC level that's going to be competent going forward. Now, I don't think they're going to get bounced or anything like that anytime soon, and the SEC is very loyal to their teams. You do need those bottom feeders to beat up on. I do see that approach, but man, this is a program where it just feels like, hey, go there, get some NIL money if you want it, and then maybe try and jump to someplace bigger. It feels like a stepping stone program right now. And I don't know how much the SEC is going to want to retain teams like that going forward. They want brands. They want to be able to take up as much of the geography of the region as they can. And I think that's where the Big Ten has been able to jump out so much in the last few years in terms of conference expansion, is that while the SEC has taken over more of the map where they tend to dominate, Big Ten went to Los Angeles, went to the Pacific Northwest, and took up those TV markets. So if you're spending time on a market like Mississippi State and Starkville, it's like, okay, like what's the real value you're adding to this? And I understand your point about, okay, they're in a rebuilding process. It feels like they're always in a rebuilding process. So,
but they also were the first team ever ranked number 1 overall in the college football playoff rankings underneath Dan Mullen.
Sure.
Like, that's a trivia question that I'm going to know for the rest of my life.
That's great. And that was X amount of years ago. And that's cool that they have, some history to them, all those good things. And Dak Prescott was there once upon a time. Congratulations to Mississippi State and Fletcher Cox, former Philadelphia Eagle. Give him his respect. But no, I look at Mississippi State, and it's another one of those teams where I really do think there's going to be added emphasis on the bottom feeders of these leagues. And even looking within my own of like Purdue, Rutgers is particular, in that category often. Northwestern has struggled mightily for years and is spending oodles and oodles on their football program. Eventually, the dollars have to make sense. And Mississippi State is a program that's willing to invest. It's a question of like, when are you going to get to a point where you're actually competitive within this league?
Well, the problem is also you got to realize that losing Mike Leach in the departed fashion that we did, that ultimately kind of turned them into a different corner, because they still believed that they were going to have Leach for several more years before he retired. The heart attack and his sudden passing led to the hiring of Zach Arnett. Arnett promised people inside the building that things weren't going to change. Obviously lied, led to his firing after the loss to Texas A&M. They bring in Jeff Lebby. Lebby was a guy that was supposed to be, I think many thought, a coordinator in waiting. It was him and John Summerall who eventually got the job at Tulane. I think if you bring in Summerall, the defense is a lot better. I just look at some of the moves this offseason that really bother me when it comes to Mississippi State. The fact that you held on to Coleman Hutzler as your defense coordinator. When you're ranked dead last in every single category, or bottom 3 in every single category of the SEC, at a school that has been known for turning out, and you mentioned this, Tom, stellar defensive talent. You can bring up Fletcher Cox, but also bring up Jeffrey Simmons, also bring up Darius Slay, Jonathan Banks, Benardrick McKinney, countless others that have come through the program. There should be some stability on that side of the football, because even Dan Mullen, an offensive-minded coach, put an emphasis on defense being the backbone, and that has been known in the SEC. If you have a solid defense, you stand a shot on Saturdays. And right now, I don't feel like that they have that. The big question mark is, can this team improve enough with the stats? Like, I'm not looking at the record. If you go 4-8 in year 2, it's 4-8 in the SEC with a struggle conference. You can't lose to NIU. Like, you cannot lose to NIU and consider that to be a good pathway for a team that probably just 2 or 3 years ago was in the running for a top 15 finish of the AP poll. You can't believe that that's going to be the course of action. But I want to be able to say, this is an offense that went from 91st in scoring to 65th. A rushing attack that goes from 114th to 81st or 75th. A passing attack that goes from 113 to 57th. Scoring offense or third down opportunities from 119th to 55. Those are the numbers that we're looking
Those are
at.
big jumps. Those are big swings. It's possible, but I understand what you're saying.
But
It's
it's
that
like
incremental progress.
it's progress, and those are the type of progress that you want to see. Like people, if you saw Mississippi State go to a bowl game this year, to me that would define that the program is trending in the right direction.
Absolutely.
If you finish top 75 offensively and defensively in the SEC, and you're still a bottom dweller in the conference and 3-9, well, you're showing progress in that standpoint. But I can't be sitting here and saying you're allowing an Arkansas squad with no question, with questions all over the place at wide receiver to score 52 points against you. I can't fathom a world where NIU is marching on into Starkville and they're putting up 30 points when they were just riddled by the transfer portal. Like, those are the things that I can't see from Mississippi State if you want me to buy in that Jeff Lebby is, number one, the right coach, and number two, a program that in a future Super League, it's worth holding on to.
How long of a leash? You mentioned Lebby specifically. How long of a leash does he have? Like, we talk about hot seat all the time, and I don't know that he's on anybody's like super hot seat or anything like that. But if they go 4-8 this year, is that enough progress to where he's not on the hot seat going into 26?
What do the numbers look like is I think the bigger question. And who are the losses to and what's the margin of defeat? Like, if you're playing close against Tennessee and against Ole Miss, yeah, maybe you're saying, well, we're not there yet, but give us one more recruiting cycle, one more transfer portal period. We're in a good spot. But also you got to realize, is there a coach out there that wants to come to Starkville? Because the reason why they fired Joe Moorhead was because he didn't fit the culture, but they also had a good inclination that Washington State wasn't going to retain Mike Leach. Leach wanted one more shot to go coach in the SEC. They swung big. They got their guy. If there's a coach that wants to come down there that is in a better standpoint than what a guy like Jeff Lebby is doing, I can see them make the fire, because Joe Moorhead wasn't a terrible coach at the time. He just didn't fit the culture. So if you're trending upwards in certain formalities, I think that he is safe. If you lose to Northern Illinois, all bets are off. You cannot afford to lose to a G5 program in the SEC. It's inexcusable.
That Mississippi State segment was a little better than I thought it would be. So I know we started from the bottom. That really wasn't bad. I hope the Mississippi State fans enjoy that. If you watch that live or on replay, make sure that you do hit the subscribe button. Again, the power to Tom Hannifan, Cole Thompson, TJ Pittinger here with you. All right, let's shift over to the Big Ten for a little bit. Let's talk about Nebraska. We're not starting all the way at the bottom here. Tom got a little bit of an easier one here, I feel like, with a team that at least has some intrigue. But we are going to talk about the Nebraska Cornhuskers, who my Florida State Seminoles rated a little bit, certainly from a coaching perspective.
Yes.
We'll talk about that, I'm sure, in a little bit. But Tom, tell us about Nebraska a little bit. Thoughts on their 24 and what 25 could look like for them.
Well, first of all, shout out to our mutual friend, Cornhusker great, Adam Carricker.
Yes.
I know he's very, very excited about what Matt Rule and company can do there. I picked Nebraska for this one because it's kind of, I don't know necessarily which version of Nebraska we're going to get. You've seen that incremental progress under Matt Rule, but looking at 2024, they finished 7-6. They beat Boston College in the Pinstripe Bowl, capping off the season. Started winning 5 of 6, and then you lost 5 of your last 6. Now, the back end of the season, you saw quarterback Dylan Raiola improve under new offensive coordinator Dana Holgerson, who was literally bored and just wanted to coach ball again. So it was really cool to see that infusion from a guy who's a respected offensive coordinator. Some marquee moments: you beat Colorado in week 2 before Colorado was like largely irrelevant, but still a team that had a lot of talent. So that was an important win for Nebraska at that point in time. You get shellacked by Indiana 56-7, but then you play the eventual national champions, Ohio State, tight by a score of 21-17. You lose. Your last 3 losses of the season come by 1 score. So that was great. The big problem for them is in the offseason, so many people left. And you understand why Matt Rule has been talking publicly about tampering and why should we even have a spring game when people are going to poach our players. In the end, their leading rusher, which granted they didn't run the ball very well to begin with, but Dante Dowdle certainly has ability. He's off to the transfer portal. Linebacker Stephon Thompson, who had the best PFF defensive grade on the team, he transferred to Florida State. Thanks, TJ, for that one. Linebacker Mekhi Gabor off to Mizzou. And then on top of that, your defensive line got raided. Jamari Butler, Ty Robinson, Nash Hutmacher, James Williamson, Prince Will Montemillion. I mean, like, it was basically the entire defensive line room just packed up and left Lincoln, Nebraska. The positive thing is that you did do well in the transfer portal in replacing a lot of different pieces. The biggest wins were on the offensive line, and that's where Nebraska struggled the most last season. really struggled to protect Dylan Raiola in his true freshman season as the starter, and really could not run the football. Had one instance where they had a 100-yard rusher. Rocco Spindler from Notre Dame, the runners up to the national championship, a great piece added to the interior of that offensive line. Elijah Pritchett, an offensive tackle from Alabama, another nice piece. You got some talent on the edges from Kentucky and Cal, and Dane Key and Isaiah Hunter for wide receiver position. Deshaun McCullough from Oklahoma, Marcus Watson-Trent from Georgia Southern. You get some pieces at linebacker to help supplement, and they did all right in terms of recruiting, getting a 4-star linebacker in Christian Jones. Of their 20 recruits in this class, all of them are 20th or better within the state of Nebraska. I personally am a big fan of seeing new coaching staffs win their state. That's so important, and Nebraska has obviously been a king within its own state in terms of getting people to play for the Cornhuskers, but still, I think that's an important piece, and if you start to lose guys to other states, that's where you become worried. So Matt Rule, I think, is doing all the right things there in terms of putting this team in the right direction. Big games this year. You're opening up at Arrowhead in Kansas City against Cincinnati. I think that could kind of go either way, depending on how Cincinnati and Sorsby play. September 20th versus Michigan. Not sure what we're going to get out of Michigan. Is Mikey Keene the starter at that point? Is Bryce Underwood the starter at that point? October 18th at Minnesota. That's just a tough game, period. November 1st versus USC. Jaden Mayava versus the world, with Lincoln Riley potentially really pressing to get wins at that point in the season in what feels like a do-or-die year for Riley at USC. November 22nd at Penn State. November 28th, home against Iowa. There are people out there that think that Nebraska could finish as well as 10-2 with their only losses coming in those last two games I just mentioned, at Penn State and versus Iowa. I see this being as bad as an 8-4 season potentially for Nebraska. And that's still, we were talking about incremental progress from Mississippi State, going from 5-7 in 2023 under Rule to 6-6 in the regular season under Rule and making a bowl game and winning said bowl game to jumping to 8-4 at worst. You're seeing that progress, but is it enough to potentially get yourself into that upper echelon of the Big Ten that you might actually have a chance at the playoff? I mean, shoot, they go 10-2, it's a reality, but still, I could see a world where Nebraska is in that logjam of Big Ten teams on the outside looking in when we get to the playoff.
Feels like if that's the case, right, and they're like an 8-4, 9-3 team, maybe just on the outside looking in, it feels like year three, I don't know that you would, again, I don't want to use the word hot seat, but that's what I'm going to use. I don't know that it would be a hot seat situation, but it would feel like there would be a lot of pressure in 26. And this is not a 2026 preview of Nebraska because even February might be too early for 2025.
Right.
But it feels like if you go 8-4 this year, again, progress, is it enough? I don't know. But the pressure would be there to where Nebraska needs to make the playoff in 2025. Or I'm sorry, 2026, right? It's a stepping stone year. It's Raiola's third year in the system. You'd imagine that if he's the quarterback in 26, which no reason to think he won't be, that would be the year they really need to make the jump. And it feels like, just, again, a very outsider perspective here. I know that you're more tuned in with things in the Big Ten than I am. It feels like that would be, I mean, Nebraska fans are just miserable at times. Like we actually have a lot.
Bad for them.
Yeah, they were so hyped up, man, at 5-1 to start the year, blowing out Colorado. And then it was just like, the world came crashing down there late in the year. And it was like, man, are we even going to make a bowl? Like, is it just the same old Nebraska? But it feels like if they can just get that incremental progress this year, that 26 really could be their year. Not that they're punting, right? The schedule is favorable enough to where, man, if you split in your four big games, I mean, you're probably going 10-2 as long as you don't have anything kind of trip you up. And so they could certainly make a run at it this year. I don't know that this is the year that people are pegging Nebraska to make a run to make the playoff. But, man, with an expanded playoff with 4 guaranteed spots that we talked about in our first segment, it really feels like this could be the stepping stone to 26 being really successful.
Here's my question for Tom real fast. We know what Matt Rule's history is. It's year 3. Everyone looks at year 3. Look at him at Temple. Took the team to the AAC championship game. Year 3 at Baylor. Took the team to the Big 12 championship game. When you look out at Lincoln and what they've been able to add in on recruiting the last 2 years, how they've been able to turn a lot of games that were blowouts into one-score matchups, and then you throw in a better offensive line, Dana Holgerson working along with Dylan Raiola, what you've added into the wide receiver position, what you've added in on the defensive line. Does it feel like that the narrative around a guy like Matt Rule is, well, you did it in Waco, you did it at a Temple in Philadelphia, it's Lincoln. Like we fired the pride of Lincoln and Scott Frost because if he failed to meet expectations,
Right.
we don't have that allegiance to you. You've done this at other schools. We kind of are moving up the narrative just a little bit because of if you've done it there and the pride that we have in this program and how miserable we've been for the last decade plus since we fired Bo Pelini. Do you feel like that they're kind of rushing it a little bit forward where you got to show that this is the year where maybe you don't go to Indianapolis, but you're in that conversation for a top 15 finish?
I don't feel like he should be on the hot seat. I think there's going to be Nebraska fans that do want him to be on the hot seat. And to your point, year 3, I think it's a little hasty to assume that year 3, okay, we've got to make some monumental leap. Like I just said, 6-6 in the regular season last year. To jump to potentially 10-2 would be a huge leap. Now, all the pieces that I just mentioned that they went into the transfer portal, I'd be very worried because it's about the trenches. You've replaced some things along the defensive line, but you had a mass exodus at that position. You solidified some stuff on the offensive line. If anything that we've learned in college football over the last 5 years is the return to run the football, play good defense. A lot of people want to spread it out, and I think Dylan Raiola has a bright future ahead of him. He did not have the time to do very much at all last year and was learning. And admittedly, you changed offensive coordinators in the middle of the season. That would throw anybody off, but it did help him in the back end of the season. This is a Nebraska team that has been playing close games for a while now under Rule. They ended the 2023 season on a last-second field goal loss to Iowa at Nebraska. Had they won that, they'd have been in a bowl game that year. And I think Nebraska fans were pretty excited the fact that they were that close with an okay team. I think Matt Rule is moving them in the right direction. My concern with them is Matt Rule is consistently a voice in the public about tampering NIL in the transfer portal. Is he worried or is he lobbying? I think he's lobbying. Matt Rule has done this dance a variety of different times now, but we're all learning this new era. Everything could change in the drop of a hat. I just don't see Nebraska all of a sudden cracking the top 4 of the Big Ten because I think there's bigger questions within the conference. I think you can safely say that Ohio State, Penn State, and Oregon are the 3 best teams within the conference, however you want to rank those going into the next season. It's a crapshoot for number 4. Indiana, are they similar with Fernando Mendoza at quarterback? Does Kurt Cignetti once again roll out a team that beats up on bad teams and then can't win the big ones against the really credible teams? Illinois was a good team last year, and Brett Bielema was in the public talking about, shoot, we should have been in the college football playoff if Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina are complaining. They had to complain as well. Minnesota with PJ Fleck, continuously competitive. Michigan, I think, is the big X factor within the Big Ten this year because you just don't know what they're going to be. Does Bryce Underwood take over as starter potentially in like week 4 and all of a sudden just be Cam Newton like people expect him to be? We just don't know. So I think Nebraska has a chance, but they are going to have to win the games that matter. And that is a mental makeup thing that only comes from multiple years. I don't think Matt Rule should be on the hot seat. I can completely understand why Husker fans are like, we'd like to win something significant now, please.
How do you feel about the loss of Tony White on the defensive line? Which, congratulations, TJ. You got one of the best defensive coordinators in the sport.
Yeah, I feel great about it, but go ahead, Tom.
No, I mean, honestly, the defensive line was good, but it was a problem. They were able to replace some things within the transfer portal. Getting Warrior was really helpful from Mizzou. So, again, it's all going to be done in the trenches for Nebraska this upcoming season. So I think you're going to see a change along the defensive line. I was very encouraged to see the way that Matt Rule was reinvesting in the linebacker position. That continues to be this thing in college football that's such a forgotten position and in football as a whole. But I'll point towards the Philadelphia Eagles and what they just did in the Super Bowl. A big reason why that was successful, yes, if you can rush 4 and you can drop 7, you're going to be really successful. But that linebacker position has changed so much over the last 5-10 years. You have to be a Zach Bond-esque player that, yes, if we ask you to rush, you can get there, but you've got to be able to cover, and you've got to be able to cover a lot of different people. We can't just put you on a tight end or a running back and say that's good enough. I think the way that they've recruited at linebacker and gotten people in the transfer portal, they've given themselves some flexibility off the edges, but they're going to be deeper at that position. So I think that's going to help things, even if it's not the same bite that they had at D-line last year.
I'm excited to see what Nebraska does. Again, they have a incredibly passionate fan base, and one that, like I said, I don't feel bad about any of the stuff we stole, but I do feel bad that, they're great fans, and if you're a Nebraska fan watching this, you at least have our sympathy, and we won't root
Very
for
much.
We have Tom's sympathy. You don't have mine.
I'm rooting for them. I'd like to see them be successful.
Yeah, I like to see them still be the same miserable people out in the Memorial Stadium every year. It's always fun to watch.
I'm not a huge fan of this, like, college football is better when this team is good. Like, I kind of hate that argument. Like, college football is better when USC or college football is always great, right? Like, stop diminishing our sport. Like, the ratings go up every year, and Miami hasn't won anything in forever, and neither has USC, and neither has, I know they were in it this year, but neither has Notre Dame. Like, college football's still been great.
It's honestly it's even better when you think about it this way, just real fast. It's even better when you think about it when you overhype them and then you realize, we did it once again. Texas overhyping Texas A&M, Nebraska, and Miami.
Yeah, we've got to stop to it. But Nebraska is the one of those three that you just mentioned that I wouldn't mind seeing do well. I just feel like their fans somewhat deserve it. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just, begging for subscribers here from Nebraska fans. But anyway, if you are a Nebraska fan and you're watching, make sure that you hit the button. A Big Ten SEC fan or a fan of any college football team. We'll continue to cover the Power 2 and all of college football here on College Football Addiction. Let's talk about some teams now that are maybe underrated. Maybe people aren't talking about them enough. Now, we had some qualifiers for this. Like, Ole Miss isn't on this list, right? Teams that have won 10 games, teams that are right there in like Alabama's not on this list, right? Everyone is talking about those teams. But some teams that are maybe dark horses, maybe underrated within the landscape of college football, maybe some not sleeping giants, but just sleeping college football contenders is what's written here. If I could read the notes that are right in front of me, that'd probably be good. Cole, start us off.
Look, it's really funny to think about a team that left the Pac-12, goes to the Big Ten, loses its head coach to Alabama, and then is kind of forgotten about. But what Jedd Fisch is building out in Washington right now, I think is really intriguing. It's very similar to the same approach as Matt Rule. Year one, you build your foundation. Year two, you establish your culture. Year three, you swing big. I love what I saw last year from Damon Williams at quarterback. I thought he played awesome in the bowl game against Louisville. They did a good job of transferring in these portal players, including Amari Evans from Penn State, linebacker Jacob Manu, who has a relationship with this defense from Arizona, defensive back Takario Davis. They also bring in Utah defensive lineman Samote Peppa. Kansas State offensive tackle Carver Willis, I think, is going to be a plug-and-play addition at that left tackle spot. Jonah Williams, one of the best running backs in college football that just completely gets forgotten about and is Jonah Coleman, my apologies. He has been phenomenal really the last 2 years when he was at Arizona, comes on into Seattle, replaces the same amount of production, gets over 800 rushing yards. I love the Ryan Walters hire. He's a good defensive mind, maybe not a great defensive head coach, but you feel good about him calling one side of the football. Denzel Boston had a breakout year last year with over 800 receiving yards. And then you look at their schedule. They avoid Penn State, Indiana, Iowa, and Minnesota. 3 of those teams are going to be fighting for that number 4 spot. They get Ohio State and Illinois in Seattle. They only have 1 game in the Midwest in the month of November against Wisconsin. Their other 2 road games are on the West Coast. So when I look at what Washington can be, if Damon Williams takes that next step forward in this offense, if you get quality play from Amari Evans at wide receiver, if the defense can be really stable underneath Ryan Walters, 9-3, 10-2, it's not far-fetched to believe the Huskies could be right back in. I really believe year 3 for Jedd Fisch is where we're going to see him hit. But don't doubt Seattle. Don't doubt what Washington's been. They have been one of the more consistent teams in the Pac-12 when hot underneath Chris Peterson, underneath Kalen DeBoer. They can be that underneath a guy like Jedd Fisch as well.
I am up next, but I'm going to pass mine here because I'm going to do mine together. So, Tom, what you got?
I'm going with South Carolina, and it's not necessarily a sleeper, but they need to win this year. I think there's pressure on Shane Beamer and company, not really in a worst way, but like, why shouldn't they wind up as the 3rd best team in the SEC? I mean, Texas and Georgia, I feel like should wind up being 1 and 2. We'll see what Georgia winds up being really under Gunnar Stockton, but still, this is wide open. I like Nico at Tennessee, but I'm not in love with what I saw out of Nico at Tennessee last year. Does he take a leap in the offseason? Certainly has all the tools to do it. With Lenore Sellers, you might be looking at the best quarterback in the SEC in 2025. He really came on back end of last season. the way that Shane Beamer and this program have invested in that defensive line, that's maybe the best defensive line in the country last year, maybe the best defensive line in the country next year. That is the recipe for winning. The question is, can they develop a running game? Can they support Lenora Sellers? That's the interesting thing for me in this upcoming season is Shane Beamer was really upset in that Cheez-It Bowl against Brett Bielema. So it's like, all right, you were literally crying on the field about stuff going on here, and then crying in the public about, oh, is this team getting snubbed from the college football playoff? Well, this schedule is rough for South Carolina, and it's rough for a lot of SEC teams. But looking at what they've got in 2025, you open versus Virginia Tech, then South Carolina State, then Vandy, at Mizzou, Kentucky, at LSU in Death Valley, home against Oklahoma, home against Alabama, at Ole Miss, at A&M, Coastal Carolina at home, and you close the season against maybe the eventual ACC champion in Clemson, your arch rival. Good luck with that schedule because it's a murderer's row, but I feel like the pressure is enormous on South Carolina to make the college football playoff in 2025.
Yeah, and they were, again, I won't try to turn this show into the blame the refs guy. They were one bad call away from being there, right?
And they should have been. I'm sorry. Mickey Minwar's pick six should have counted. It should have been week 3.
Absolutely. Well, as tough as it was for me to not pick Florida State in this thing, I will go to one of the smaller.
Shocker.
I will go outside because I don't believe it. I'd really be pushing a lot of. You thought I was pushing hot air on Nebraska. I'd be pushing a lot of hot air if I went with FSU here. No, I'm going to go outside of the Power 2 for this, and this is tough because I think the Big 12 is so wide open, and there are so many teams that, like you just mentioned, right, when we talked about Nebraska, like we know who the top 3 teams in the Big 10 are. We think we know who the top 1 or 2 in the SEC will likely be. The Big 12 is wide open, but I think that the way things set up for both Kansas and Kansas State, picking 2 rivals, I'm going to do both of mine now because I think that what they both have and why people should be talking about these teams both had disappointing by their standards and what they expected in 2024. I think both teams bounce back in a pretty significant way. Both teams return extremely talented quarterbacks who, again, both being banged up and both just underperforming at times in Jalen Daniels and Avery Johnson. They might be the best 2 quarterbacks in the conference. We'll see how it all kind of plays out, but they've got a lot of talent there at the quarterback position. They both have the easiest Big 12 schedules. When you look at just strength of schedule, early metrics, they both do really, really well there. Their out of conference is not extremely tough, right? Kansas does have Missouri early. Kansas State just has Army and Arizona. That's an out of conference game, an old home and home that they're honoring part 2 of. Kansas State opens up the year week 0 in Dublin. If any Kansas State fans or Iowa State fans are watching this, go to that. It is phenomenal. A week-long drinking in Dublin and then going to that game, even if your team loses it on a last-second field goal, is a lot of fun. But that might be their toughest game of the year. And then it gets a lot easier down the stretch, besides maybe their rivalry game against Kansas if they're as good as I think they can be. You guys talked about the teams that your sleepers avoided. Both these teams avoid BYU. Both these teams avoid Arizona State, the Big 12 champions from last year. They both get UCF, and they both get Oklahoma State, 2 teams that are really down right now. One of them plays Cincinnati, and they play Utah. We'll see what Utah is if they can bounce back from a really bad year. They play Utah to end the year consecutively. Like they play Kansas and they play Kansas State to finish it off. Utah does. And so I think they've got a really good chance to rack up a lot of wins. The thing about the Big 12 is anybody can trip you up. There's a lot of question marks in the Big 12 of who gets back. Does Colorado kind of maintain any form without their top 2 guys leaving, with Coach Prime still out there? I don't know. I like the way that their schedule's set up. I like the way that they have an advantage at quarterback almost every single week. I know that Iowa State, Arizona State, BYU will be teams that are in the mix in the Big 12 as well. But I certainly like at least one of the Kansas teams to make a run at the playoffs, because I think at least one Kansas team, either Kansas or Kansas State, makes the Big 12 title game.
I keep telling people in the SEC, don't fall for Kansas. Lance Leipold will be coming into Como, and he'll be swinging for the fences. Like that is the type of dude that you want to go after. See, I love that Tom brings up that I'm an SEC guy, but yet my other team is a Big 10 team, and that we're talking about, there's 3 teams at the very front. Tom's doing it. He's forgetting about Illinois, because Illinois has a case that does belong in the college football playoff last year. And Brett Bielema has called out coaches analysts for not putting them in the running for being a team that should be favored going into 2025. They should. They returned 18 starters from a roster that had double-digit wins for the first time in nearly a decade out in Champaign. Luke Altmaier, the starting quarterback, he's back for another year. You didn't lose either of your coordinators. Your leading passer, your leading rusher, your leading tackler, your leading sack artist, and your leader in interceptions are all back for 2025. The biggest thing that I look at is stability on the offensive line. All 5 starting offensive linemen are back in 2025, including a potential All-American in left tackle J.C. Davis. So I feel really good about having not only a stable ground game, but a stable pass protection for my quarterback who is mobile, who is not afraid to tuck and run and pick up those 3 or 4 extra yards to create a first down, move the sticks, and put ourselves in a prime position. They avoid Michigan and Penn State. Michigan is the ultimate wild card. If Bryce Underwood or Mikey Keene hits, congratulations. They're going to be a 10-win team potentially. But they avoid them. They also avoid Penn State. They also avoid Iowa, and they also avoid Oregon. They host Ohio State. And Ohio State is one of those teams that will be breaking in a new quarterback in Julian Sain. He also hosts USC. I'm not a believer in USC this year. I don't believe in Jaden Maeva. I like the wide receiver room. I don't like the offensive line. I don't think they did enough defensively. Week 2, they played Duke on the road in Durham. That's Darian Mensah's really first major test since joining the Blue Devils. And this is a defense that returns all 5 starters in the secondary. They have a 3-man rushing attack that nobody had over 1,000 yards, but everyone averaged 4.6 yards or more last year. And you have stability when it comes to what you can trust in terms of guys that are going to be able to break on out. Hudson Clement comes on over from West Virginia. I thought he had a really good season last year for the Mountaineers. Solid wide receiver number 2. And you also land a couple of depth pieces from the Big Ten and Kurt Neal and Leon Lowry from Wisconsin. I like what I've seen from the Fighting Brett Bielema's. I think that they're a very well-established team. And honestly, for my money right now, they should be the number 4 roster. When you return 85% of your production and you have a manageable schedule where all you got to do is split the series between Ohio State and USC and not lose another trip-up game, why shouldn't you be thinking about going to Indianapolis? Why shouldn't you be thinking about making a 12-team playoff? And honestly, they feel like next year's Indiana that comes out of the blue. I'm not going to be sleeping on them. I think the Illini belong in this conversation of underrated teams.
I agree.
I like how, before Tom does the last one, I like how Tom picked an SEC team and Cole picked a Big Ten team for this. Listen, the diversity on this show really is good.
We're all about inclusion and parity. Everybody's welcome.
Totally. All about the parity, even though it's the same conferences that we all know.
Tom, you're going outside of the Power 2 for your last one. What you got?
Yes, all due respect to the mighty ACC. We have to honor everybody here. I'm looking at Louisville as a dark horse within the ACC. I was saying before, I do expect Clemson to ultimately be the ACC champion at the end of the year. I think what they've been able to do with Cade Klubnik and his development has been really impressive. Look for Louisville to potentially duplicate what Syracuse did this past year. I like what Jeff Brom does as a coach and as a coordinator as well. Getting Miller Moss, I think, was one of the more quietly important acquisitions of the offseason. It feels very Kyle McCord-esque. I just did not understand the way that Lincoln Riley was utilizing Miller Moss at USC. It felt like I had Caleb Williams. Will you be Caleb Williams? And the answer was no. That's not Miller Moss's skill set. Asking him to throw 35, 40, 45, 50 times per game when Woody Marks is standing right there and you could have handed him the ball and you actually had a decent offensive line at the time was creating some running lanes for Woody Marks. It wasn't until the back half of the season that USC figured out, oh, yeah, we can do this. We can run the ball and we don't need to put it on Miller Moss. So I thought he got a raw deal in Southern California. This is a brand new start. He's got some interesting pieces in a good running back tandem, good wide receiver tandem. I just hope that there is a running game that they're committed to under Jeff Brom to support Miller Moss. Because again, the more his attempts go up, the worse that it could be for the offense. I'm happy to see Louisville finally have a quarterback that they can really get behind. Shuck did a nice job last season, but there are times where 9 quarterbacks on this roster. You've got to make sure that you have your solidified guy. And I think Louisville can make a run. Defensively, they might give up some points and they could be in a bunch of shootouts. So that could kind of hurt everything I just said about Miller Moss being limited in terms of attempts. But I still think I like what Jeff Brom and company are capable of doing. And we were talking about it before. Does Florida State rebound? What does UNC look like under Bill Belichick? Miami with Carson Beck. That's a big outlier within the ACC. Kevin Jennings and SMU should be right there in the mix, obviously, having made the college football playoff this past year. But Louisville could sneak in as one of those two ACC teams that gets into the college football playoff.
One player that you didn't name that I'm really excited to see is Colin Lacey having a full healthy season with a better quarterback play.
Yes.
He was phenomenal at South Alabama. That might be the best wide receiver that Miller Moss has played with in 2 years.
What's interesting about Louisville specifically is they avoid Florida State, which maybe they would want to play Florida State at this point. But outside of that, they play the best three teams in the conference. And so their record in those games, and then their record outside of that, they got tripped up at Stanford last year in a game they had no business losing, a game that I turned off because I thought it was over and flipped to something else. So you can't lose any of those games, but they do have Clemson, SMU, and Miami. Now they get Clemson at home, which they beat them in Death Valley last year. Clemson, kind of an up and down mess last year at times. So we'll see how they've rebounded. I too like Clemson to win the ACC. But they got to go to Miami and they got to go to SMU, two places that, I don't think that either one of them is just overwhelmingly tough environments to play in, but two teams that could be pretty good. Can they go 1-2 in those games and not get tripped up anywhere else? If so, they're probably right there at the end being talked about. Do they make it? I don't know, but they're probably in the top 15 with a chance. And so they play a tough schedule. Louisville plays in conference. They play a really tough schedule. They get Kentucky at the end of the year. Obviously, it should be a game that they win. But how do they play in those big games? Because last year, they beat Clemson, but they lost all their other big games, right? They lost to SMU. They lost when Miami came up there. They played Notre Dame. They lost that one too. So how do they play in those big games? They went 1-3 last year. Can they be a little bit better? Can they be 1-2? Can they somehow get to 2-1? They get 2-1. They're certainly in at that point. So, if they don't trip up elsewhere. So Louisville's an interesting one, but I like our picks. And yeah, I'm not sleeping on these teams after hearing you guys we are going to do kind of we talked about all these previous 4 segments between us beforehand, and we wrote down notes. We kind of knew where we were going with some of this. The guys are getting this completely off the cuff, and we're going to do this every week. Maybe we'll get a better name than TJ's surprise for this, but today it is a surprise because the guys have no idea what's coming at them. So let's get into it. I am today on this, hypothetically, this is a hypothetical segment, right? So just having some fun with this on episode 1. Maybe you guys will hate this and we'll never do anything hypothetical again. But I am firing Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti. I'm replacing them with Cole Thompson and Tom Hannifan, though. So, and you're going to represent the conference. So you guys all just got pay increases.
Thank you.
Awesome. Great. I'm retiring.
Yeah, I resigned today, actually.
Yeah, this is your last show. But you are now the conference commissioner for your conference, Cole in the SEC, Tom in the Big Ten. And we are doing, in February, a realignment draft right now. And we're going to get both conferences up to 24 teams. So, Cole, you'll have 2 more picks. They are going to be at the end of the draft. I thought that it made sense for the SEC to get their extra 2 picks last, because the Big Ten had to take on maybe a couple of partners that they didn't really care about taking on. So that's how we're doing it. I'm the commissioner and I'm kind of detailing it out. 2 caveats. UNC comes with North Carolina State. Okay. So if you take them, the other person, because of the legal stuff, we expect that to be what happens when it all goes down. I'm not putting a year on this. It's just everybody's free right now. UNC comes with NC State, so if you take them, you lose your next pick, and the other person gets 2 picks, and then we'll snake it back and forth from there. And then Notre Dame's off limits, so you can't take them. I don't think they're realistic to go anywhere soon, so you can't take them with your first pick. Since the Big Ten has more teams and runs things right now with the last 2 national championships, we'll let the SEC go first.
Cool. Let's go ahead and lock them on up. I think that Florida State's a team that wants to come to the SEC. I think they're a team that people believe is going to be one of the first that's going to come on in. I look at what Florida State brings in terms of revenue, and I also look at it from beyond college football. College basketball is always at a peak. When you bring in Florida State baseball, that's going to do wonders alongside with teams like Texas A&M, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, Auburn. We already run the SEC. We already run the college baseball realm. Why not we just go ahead and lock in Florida State? We're going to put pressure on a guy like Mike Norvell to have to deliver, because if you are the Seminoles, you should be meeting expectations. You should be a part of the standard that goes to a 12-team college playoff on the regular and be ranked in the top 25 in recruiting and transfer portal rankings. So Florida State, welcome on into the SEC. Here is your participation trophy. You only get 1 year to kind of finalize the ship, or we're going to have to make you start turning the corner and be a little bit better.
I don't feel like the fat kid in dodgeball being picked last, because being picked first overall makes me. We can actually just end the show right there.
Yeah, I say, there you go. You're joining the better conference anyways, so it's all good.
Tom,
I think the Big Ten made it very clear with its last realignment that they're going for television markets. Geography almost doesn't matter anymore. I think my pick as the new Big Ten commissioner would be the Miami Hurricanes. I think it makes a lot of sense to go after that TV market. That brand makes a lot of sense, and you kind of invite more rivalries from within the SEC now. If this is the world we're living in, where Florida State, Florida are there, well, gosh, now you can get these games as something that's non-conference between the two conferences. So everybody flourishes, and that's what I'm really all about as the new commissioner of the Big Ten. So I just want everybody to eat. But I think Miami makes a lot of sense there now. Is that like long-term with Mario Cristobal? No, but there's a ton of money there. So I think that's really going to help. But like, yeah, you're looking at TV markets now if you're within the Big Ten. The SEC's gift for so long has been the ability to galvanize whole states. So you're starting to get in the weeds a little bit if Penn State, if the Big Ten was like, well, Kansas geographically makes sense. It's like, yeah, but Miami and a lot of other brands are far sexier. So I'm going with the Hurricanes.
Back to Cole.
Well, Tom's talking about TV markets. I'm talking about the biggest state in the nation. And I'm talking about a team that currently has just proven that it can win in the ACC. SMU comes from money. SMU is dominant when it comes to what it can afford in terms of revenue. And the big reason why they wanted to join the ACC was to get into a Power 4 conference. So we already own Austin. We already own the Houston area because College Station is 90 minutes away. Why don't we throw in the Dallas area, which is the 5th largest television market out there, bring in SMU that proved its worth last season with an 11-win season. Rhett Lashley has been rumored to go to the SEC to a program like Arkansas. When I just join the SEC and you get a significant pay raise by joining with SMU, we're going to build a brand new stadium out in University Park. Gerald Ford, thanks for the efforts, but we're going to build an actual 100,000 place stadium. And we also now get to add in more to the state of Texas. Texas has been known for having some of the best recruits in college football, and now we get to retain those recruits in the state of Texas. So SMU, from a revenue standpoint, from what we talk about when it comes to a television market standpoint, you throw in them and FSU, we already are owning the southeastern region, and we're staying geographically sound because we already have Texas and Oklahoma.
I like the SMU pick. Sneaky good pick there because people would think like Clemson, North Carolina, other brands. SMU's a surprise there, but I like it.
See, Tom would have picked them, and that's why I want to make sure that he couldn't get them.
Some strategy in this game. Back to the Big Ten.
Well, I mean, since we're speaking about the Dallas market, the Big Ten selects TCU. I'm very proud to have the Horned Frogs. Listen, if there's going to be competition within one of the largest TV markets, the Big Ten is not going to just roll over and allow that to occur. It's got to be something where the Big Ten goes and gets a foothold in Texas. I think it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense geographically, as I just mentioned. But TCU getting there, I think I actually like that brand a little bit better than SMU. I understand there's a ridiculous amount of money at SMU, and as a Penn Stater, we saw all the private jets that attempted to fly into University Park for the college football playoff. But I think TCU has had a better track record of winning over the last 10 years, and you're in that hotbed. I think it makes a lot of sense for the Big Ten to be able to split Dallas with the SEC. I think that's smart.
Cole.
Fine. Come on, Clemson. You can join the party, I guess. Come on. We already know that you want to be a part of us. You're joining forces with FSU. You basically want to hire the guy from Suits to get you out of your contract. So we're just going to welcome you on in. You'll be welcomed here with open arms. Dabo Swinney may not, but still we'll find you the right coach. We'll bring you in a better formation. A guy that's going to believe in the transfer portal and put an emphasis on recruiting. Listen, if you land a guy like Kay Klubnik and you're able to put up 30 points and be the only team that did so against Texas's defense, you belong in the conversation for at least being a part of a conference that just means more. You mean more to us, so welcome on into the SEC, Clemson.
Back to Tom.
Colorado. Taking the Colorado Buffaloes and Deion Sanders because I believe he's probably got more eyeballs than most of the teams that we just mentioned combined. So I don't know how long you're going to have Deion for, but at least in the short term, Colorado seems like an interesting pick, and you can compete at that respect up against a blue blood like Clemson because you're kind of getting thin on that front. But I'm going to go with Colorado and the Buffaloes, provided you can convince Deion to stick around a little bit longer.
Cole?
I have two teams that I'm trying to decide between. I feel like that Tom may take one of them, so I'm going to take the first one that he is probably leaning towards. And I might be completely wrong in this, but there's something about a tradition of having a former Frank Beamer team in the SEC. Give me Virginia Tech. I think Virginia Tech comes with a ton of tradition. I think it comes with a ton of culture. And then keep in mind, The SEC doesn't have a footnote currently in the state of Virginia. So you bring in now Blacksburg, you bring in Lane Stadium, you bring in the tradition of Sandstorm, which for my money is the best tradition in college football. On top of that, you're going to be able to, I think, have that value of what is a former Big East team, but still be able to retain that type of SEC lore culture. I think that it does wonders when it comes to also basketball. So I think Virginia Tech's a pretty good spot. I want to own the state of Virginia. I want to have a foreground. Go ahead and give me the Hokies. I'm not a fan of turkeys, but you know what? If we got to take you on in, sure. We'll just call you.
What's wrong with dark meat? You don't like dark meat turkey?
No, it's all about the white meat down there. You know what the SEC is. Exactly.
Yeah, that's fair.
Tom, you got 3 teams left. You're up to 21.
Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati geographically makes a lot of sense, and you put a stranglehold on the state of Ohio, which is a great recruiting bed, and you get one of the bigger cities in the process. You get a brand that has done consistently pretty well, obviously made a deep run into the college football playoff not too long ago. You can put more resources into that, and I think Cincinnati gives you some options, I think, within the state, within the region that are really, really exciting. If you turn that into a powerhouse of Ohio State and Cincinnati, that's a really nice combination there. So you're kind of getting down to it where it's like, all right, where are we really going to grab eyeballs? Where are we going to grab recruits and dollars? I think Cincinnati, especially the point you just made, Cole, about basketball, having that foothold in the state of the city of Cincinnati, which is a really, really important hotbed for college basketball, whether that's Xavier or Cincinnati. Give me the Bearcats.
Cole has 4 teams left. Georgia Tech, UNC, NC State, Virginia, all on the board. Obviously, all our Big 12 teams, too, minus ECU, Cincinnati, are available as well. Cole, what you got?
Yeah, sorry. I got to take Atlanta. I got to go ahead and lock up that market. Give me Georgia Tech. Listen, the Yellow Jackets are starting to improve underneath Brent Key. I think the bigger thing is that there's already the rivalry established when it comes to Georgia. Plus, if you have ever heard the fight song for Alabama, they say send the Yellow Jackets to a watery grave, because at one point, Georgia Tech was part of the SEC. So you're bringing them back on in. Give me the value of the state of Georgia all throughout the southeastern region. I'm going to lock up that television market in Atlanta. So I already own Dallas. I already own Atlanta. I already own parts of
Florida. Dallas. You're splitting it with us.
I own half of Dallas. You know what? So I'm in a pretty good spot. I'm not going to let you take Atlanta too. I'm taking the Yellow Jackets.
You got 2 picks left, Tom. Give me one of them.
2 picks left. Dang. Yeah, the television markets are kind of disintegrating a little bit, because it's like you would love it if Northwestern did something significant in Chicago, but you just don't feel like that strongly about that situation. Man. I think this is where you kind of have to start leaning into like, all right, which brands have the best notoriety and are going to be able to produce? I'm going to go grab Oklahoma State out of the Big 12. Oklahoma State having a really good track record, basically being the standard that is left within the Big 12. I mean, not that great of a season this past year, but still one of the biggest brands remaining out there. Oklahoma State continues to give you a foothold there in the Midwest. I don't love it, but at this point, beggars can't be choosers. So let's go with the Pogues.
we're reluctantly taking you, Gundy. SEC, you've got to pick.
Here's the good news, is that I can take the state of North Carolina with 2 picks at the very end, and I still have 1 pick left. I want pride in the state of Kentucky. I haven't gotten that for a while when it comes to the Wildcats. Yeah, I know they've been decent in basketball. Mark Pope, I think, is going to turn the corner. But I want stability in football. I want stability in baseball. Guess who has that? Louisville. Louisville is one of the more underappreciated cities in America. It's one of the more underappreciated colleges in America. And the fact that I'm going to be able to now add in Miller Moss and Colin Lacey the way that Tom talked about them, now I'm getting more Regency and I'm getting more positivity out in the college football realm. So Louisville, welcome on in. You're actually going to be better representing the state of Kentucky than the Wildcats ahead. We like you a lot. We think that you're a good city. Just make sure you send us a couple of bats. That way we can go ahead and hit dingers against Tom when we go play against the Big Ten.
Dude, I opted for the bourbon, but I guess the bats are acceptable too.
No, Tom's just gonna be drinking. We're gonna send Tom a celebratory bourbon when he loses.
Please do. Yeah, that's fine.
That's a good way to lose. All right, Tom, you're on your last pick.
I think I have to carve up the state of North Carolina. Give me the Tar Heels. I think with Bill Belichick there right now.
I think you would go over because you're on 24. UNC.
Am I done? I'm out of picks.
No, you have 1 pick, but you can't take both of them because
you can't split up.
I forgot about that. Okay. Yeah. I can't take both of them. Gosh, that's a tough
one. I played strategically on that one.
Yeah, you did. That was smart. God. Give me Duke. And I will say this. I'll say it after we get done because I want to hear the rest of Cole's thoughts here. But give me Duke. At least it gives me a foothold there. Certainly gives you some basketball foothold, which is important. But Duke, at least if I have a couple more years under, he was just a defensive coordinator at Penn State. Why am I laughing on this? Thank you very much, Manny Diaz. If he sticks around for a little bit, they seem to be making progress. So give me Duke. At least I can combat whatever Cole's about to do. So there you go.
Come on, welcome on in, NC State, North Carolina. You get to round out our SEC. I'm very excited to welcome you on in. Here's the deal. Number one, we're going to put an emphasis on basketball being at both of those schools. Last year, NC State went on the epic run towards the Final Four. We already know what UNC can do. Both have been very stable in baseball. And my favorite thing is that my favorite coach that is at the G5 level, John Summerall, was rumored to be hired at UNC before Bill Belichick got the job. So when Bill Belichick eventually decides to retire or go back to the NFL, now we bring him on into the SEC. He's an SEC-minded coach. He's going to bring stability to that state. He's going to bring stability to Chapel Hill. And I look at NC State, they always feel like that wild card of the ACC. There's a year that they can go 5-7. There's a year that they can go 9-3. You add them on into the SEC, they bring in that same value as what an Arkansas does or what a Kentucky does or what maybe you're going to see from Vanderbilt moving forward. So I like what Dave Duran's building out there. I think Raleigh is a very underrated market. We know that Chapel Hill is a great college atmosphere. We get to combat that and bring in that Big Ten SEC rivalry whenever they play in the in the triangle out in the area. So Duke, best of luck in the Big Ten. NC State, North Carolina, welcome into the SEC. The conference just means more.
I like it. This was fun. Something different. So
academically, I just think the Big Ten is going to continue to run circles around the SEC.
Sure, but athletically, we're going to kick your ass to oblivion, so it's all good.
I will say this as honorable mentions before we let go. Boise State, I think there's something there that somebody's going to grab them and try and take advantage of that. Not that it's a huge TV market, but them in the Mountain West just doesn't make any sense to me anymore. And Utah. Salt Lake City, there's a lot more money that's been put into BYU. BYU is another team that you could have thrown out there. But, yeah, I would have liked Utah or Boise State to have brought them into the full potential.
Honorable mentions for me would have been Houston. Look, we got College Station, which is basically right outside of Houston. So the Cougars, enjoy yourself with Willie Fritz. And then Tulane. I think New Orleans is an untapped market that absolutely could bring in more to the state of Louisiana, retain as much talent in the state besides just LSU.
These are off the wall ones, but I thought about Texas Tech for some of the reasons you guys mentioned in Texas, the money that they're obviously ponying up in the portal. And then I wonder if UCF, I know that might be a strange one now, but I'm in Tampa. They're only about an hour and a half away from me. I just wonder if that Florida market, getting, the leftovers of what Florida State, Florida, and Miami take up are still really good compared to a lot of places. It's also the Orlando market. So I don't know. Would UCF eventually be a one that people would reach for? I don't know. I don't necessarily love UCF, but I think it's an interesting one to think about in the future. So
I think this is fun. I like it.
Yeah, something different. Next year when we do this for 30 teams, we'll see what the strategy comes. When we do this for 32 teams,
I need a chalkboard or something.
Yeah, like
and a map.
Now that you know Cole's strategy, you'll be locked in. So, hey, we went a little bit overtime today, but man, we had a good time on the Power 2. If you're watching this, if you're listening, if you are involved in any way in seeing a replay or you watch this live, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We'll be back live next Wednesday at noon Eastern time to do this all over again. Maybe have more Big Ten SEC news. We'll preview a couple more teams. We'll have another surprise for these guys to debate about and talk about too. But we appreciate you guys for tuning in. Real quick before we go, Cole, where can people find you, follow you on social media? What else do you do? And then once Cole's done, Tom, same question to you.
Check out my channel at SEC Unfiltered. We talk college football, college basketball, college baseball every single day. We also do live reactions. We do previews for the upcoming SEC. You can follow us on social media at SEC Unfiltered. If you want the back and forth banner to go along with me, it's at Mr. Cole Thompson on Twitter and Instagram.
You can check me out on social media, X and Instagram at Tom Hannifan, TomHannifan. We're all sports talk, State of State, a Penn State football show, wherever you get your podcasts. Believe in Big Ten, another podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Myself and Rhett Lewis, former Indiana Hoosiers wide receiver, now works for the Big Ten Network and the NFL Network. Rhett is outstanding. And then if you're into pro wrestling, TNA Wrestling every Thursday night on Access TV in the United States, Sportsnet 360 in Canada, and worldwide on TNA Plus. Total nonstop action.
Well, appreciate you guys. Looking forward to doing this again next week. But thank you to everybody who tuned in. We will talk to you soon.